जिनिवाति दीनाम् अवीत्रवतु।
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Now, I'm Veena Srivastava from Somaya College, Zoology Department, and today we'll be working on classification of marine environment. Okay? Now, all of us have been to any seashore. Alright? All of us. Here there are so many beaches we have visited, and we have seen vast expanse of water. Now, have you ever thought what is behind or below that water? We just see the water. Now let's today examine the ecosystem of it. Now see, any marine environment is divided into two: pelagic division and benthic division. Alright. Now pelagic division is what? Pelagic division is the water part of it. All the water part of it is divided into pelagic. And there is land below the water. Alright, like for example, we have this table. Now, beyond this table, whatever is there, you can imagine to be water, and there is mass of land. Now, that mass of land which is there below, it has got different topography. That also we should know. So, basically, pelagic means to be in water, surrounded by water. Alright. So I have drawn first a rough sketch here of the zonation. Now see, the first is pelagic zone. Alright, that is the entire water, the vast expanse of water is the pelagic zone. Now this zone is further divided into two. Now what are those two? One is called as the neritic zone and next is called as the oceanic zone. Alright. Now, we leave it at that and come to the second part of it, that is the land mass which is below that water mass. Alright. Now, we begin with first, there is a land mass which is an extension of the continental land. Okay. Now, whenever you are on the shore, it is an extension of that which we call as the continental shelf. Alright. Now, this continental shelf in some places could be very wide, in some places it may not be very wide, it could be narrow also. This then slowly descends into a slope which we call as continental slope. Alright. Now this slope then forms what you call as the
Trenches.
No, it is called as the sea floor. Now just tell me, this sea floor, what do you imagine it to be? Is it a plain mass of land, or there are something like, yeah, there could be certain mounds, there could be certain trenches which are present. Alright, so pelagic means to be in water, surrounded by water, which has neritic province as well as oceanic province. So oceanic province is the bigger mass of water. Neritic, now since you know that there is what you call as the continental shelf, so the water which is above the continental shelf, we call it as neritic. Beyond that, it is all oceanic zones. Now what is the difference?
It is near the shore. Neritic is near the shore.
Neritic is very much near the shore and it is above continental shelf. So the water depth is much less. And in case of oceanic zone, the water depth is quite big. That makes a major difference. Alright. Now next, this is again the same thing. Can you see here? The entire water mass is pelagic. Then it is divided into neritic and oceanic. Neritic, which is above the continental shelf. Then oceanic, which is the other mass of water. Alright. Now next what we have to see is, what are these continental shelves. Now what did I say? Continental shelf is extension of the land. Alright? It is an extension of the land. So it is shallow, submerged extension of a continent, and they are more like the continent. That means they are more like the land than resembling the big sea floor, because it is an extension of that land. So it resembles more of it. And most of the, they may have hills, depression similar to what is there in the floor, but the main difference is it is much shallower than the oceanic province. Now it will always have rocks, mineral, oil deposit, and most of the material comprising of a shell comes from erosion of adjacent continental marks. Rivers also add a huge amount of sediments. Alright, all the rivers which open into it, rivers definitely bring sediments as they are flowing along, and all that is deposited in the sea. Now, what are the use of continental shelf? Uses intense exploration of natural resources like oil and minerals. Alright, because it's easier working there, it being shallow. Then the water depth is 75 meters or 250 feet, therefore it is accessible for mining, fishing and drilling activities. It can carry out much easy all these activities in continental shelf region rather than the oceanic zones. Is this clear? Yes. Okay, so that's about the continental shelf. Now next we come to continental slope. Now what is this continental slope? Look here. This entire region, that is a gentle sloping down of land, is called as continental slope. Now this continental slope is further divided into different parts. Now before we go to that, we must talk about continental rise. Now what is this continental rise? See, sea floor is not even. It has got trenches, it has got number of volcanic eruptions, etc., etc. All the sediments which come, they also accumulate and form a mound. So continental rise is sediments from cell slowly descend to the ocean floor by turbidity current and cause continental rise. And widest and thickest continental rise is in the Bay of Bengal at the mouth of Ganges and Brahmaputra river. Now, these are the most sediment laden rivers. The two rivers, that is Ganges and Brahmaputra river. Alright? Now, we had talked about first the pelagic zone. Now let's talk about the benthic bottom. Benthic bottom will be the land part of it. Alright? The entire land part of it, we call it as the benthic bottom. And over this benthic is present the water mass. Alright? Now, benthic bottom is basically, first division is littoral zone. Littoral zone, or we call it as intertidal area. Now why do we call it as intertidal? Now tides, you know, there is low tide, there is high tide. Alright? So some part of the land remains devoid of water during certain time. When there is high tide, it will get filled with water. When there is low tide, that area gets exposed. But then that area does get water during certain time. So the conditions there will be very different even for animals. Right? So, littoral zone is further divided into supralittoral and sublittoral zone. Did you understand what is littoral zone? It is intertidal. Intertidal, that is the area between the low tide and the high tide. Good. Now, first is supralittoral. Supralittoral is also called as splash zone. Splash zone because when the tide comes, the water splashes to some distance. So from that distance, we have to call this as supralittoral. whereas sublittoral is below the littoral zone. Once the tide recedes, that area we call it as sublittoral, below littoral zone, and all this is in the continental shelf area. Okay, so this is what we are talking about is the the ground. So you have understood what littoral zone is, the intertidal.
Yes.
Then next comes the badal zone. Alright, badal, the very term badal means bottom. Alright, that is seabed on slopes which is very deep. So badal will be this way. Alright, from continental shelf the slope begins and we have the badal zone which is quite deep. Then the third one is abyssal zone. Now basically abyssal zone means without bottom. Now without bottom, it's not without bottom, but what it means is the bottom is so much down that it is considered that it doesn't exist. Therefore you call it as abyssal zone. Alright, they are extremely deep areas. Then lastly is the hadal zone. Hadal zone is the last zone which is present here, and in here we'll find lot of deep sea trenches. There could be volcanoes, there could be mounds, and see ocean, the environment of ocean is always keeps, it's not constant. There is a lot of things going on in the ocean. Now we talk of the trenches which are present. Now trenches are present in here. These are arc-shaped depression in deep ocean floor. Now what are they? Water temperature at the bottom of the trench much cooler. Then deepest place in Earth's crust almost 3 to 6 kilometers deep. Now you can imagine 3 to 6 kilometers deep, how deep it is. And the deepest trench that we have is Mariana Trench or Western Pacific. Now it is much deeper than Mount Everest height. That means if you put Mount Everest into that trench, still there will be a lot of gap remaining. So you can imagine the dimension of that trench, which is known as the Mariana Trench. Now these are the pictures. After we have explained, let's see now how the thing is. Now see, first is the pelagic zone. That means pelagic zone, the water mass. This water mass is divided into neritic and oceanic. And here comes the land part of it. So it begins with littoral, sublittoral, badal, abyssal, hadal. So far understood. Now the pelagic zone is further divided based on two things. Alright. Now based on two things division, let's see. The first is based on penetration of light. Fine. Now the first zone is known as euphotic zone. Now euphotic zone, U is good, photic is light. So the area where there is good penetration of light, we call it as euphotic zone. Alright. Or photic zone is well lit area, that is photic zone. Next comes after that is the diasphotic zone. It is also known as twilight zone. Now diasphotic zone, diasphotic is difficult. So less amount of light penetrates into this zone. This is also known as twilight because there is diffuse light. And finally, beyond say 500, it is complete dark, and that area we call it as aphotic zone. A is no light. photogeless light, so no light at all, aphotosynthesis. Now the next thing is such a huge sea. What is the importance of light in water? Why is it needed, the light? Is it important to sea to have light? And we have actually divided it based on light, that is aphotic, dysphotic, aphotic. So what is the importance of light? Why is it important? Why does sea or ocean require light?
Because there are some sea organisms.
Yes, because light is required for what? The basic purpose, primary purpose is there are so many phytoplanktons which are the producers. So basic requirement of light of course is there for the purpose of photosynthesis. Alright, so it is required here, and the maximum energy transfer happens in photic zone. You understand? Now see, one more thing you have to remember. Now most of the vegetation or greens, whether rooted or floating, will always be present in the continental shelf area. Rooted plants, they will be always present here. They can never exist in this region. They don't get the base. But phytoplanktons, yes, they can be all over. And all of them require light. Alright? So, in this region, euphotic zone, maximum light penetration, maximum photosynthesis happens, and therefore producers are present. Then comes diaphotic, where there is not much of light, so there is not photosynthesis. But visibility is there to some extent. But when we come to aphotic zone, it's total dark. There is absolutely no light. Alright? Now, you have to also imagine that the entire mass of water here is filled with animals. Alright? There is a huge biodiversity of animals in here. Alright? And each animal is adapted to its own type of habitat. And see, there are animals right at the surface, there are animals at the bottom also. Now the conditions definitely vary from the surface to the depths of the sea. Conditions are different. Temperature will be much cooler, pressure will be much higher. So animals which are present there, they will have to adjust to that type of environmental conditions. So we have beautiful diversity in here. Now, is this understood about the light?
Yes.
Okay, and here it is shown, blue light penetrates the maximum. Usually you see the sea is blue. Yeah. Next division is based on depth of the water. Okay, so how is that divided? That is divided as epipelagic, some 200 meters. Mesopelagic is the mid layer. Bedipelagic is bottom, and abyssopelagic is quite deep. And then comes hadal-pelagic. Now hadal-pelagic generally you will find which are present in trenches. When we come to trenches, we'll talk about it. It's present in the trenches. Now all through from surface to the bottom of sea, it's buzzing with life. And beautiful biodiversity is present. Different types of animal, they have adapted themselves in the lifestyle they need to be. Now this is another view of the same thing. The same thing, intertidal, neritic over the shelf. Then comes oceanic zone. Now continental shelf, basal region, then abyssal, hail. Alright? Epipelagic, mesopelagic, bedipelagic, abyssopelagic. And here are the deep sea trenches. Now, this is particularly to show you all this we have seen. Now, what I wanted to show you that there are these trenches. Now, see, these are the deep trenches, and here are the sea mouths. Okay, it's like a sea is supposed to have forest as well as it has got these sea mounts. Forest, there are kelps, there are a lot of vegetation, very dense, which we can almost call it as a forest. Same way at the bottom, it has got trenches and sea mouths. Alright, now same thing we have shown here. Sea surface, epipelagic, mesopelagic, pedipelagic, abyssopelagic and highly pelagic. I hope you all have understood so far. This is only by depth. Epipelagic, mesopelagic, then pedipelagic, abyssopelagic and highly pelagic. Now, photic zone is the area where there is enough light, which I have discussed, and that's photic up to 600 meters, also called violet diffuse light, and aphotic is with no photosynthesis. Now, with all these classifications, there are many ways to describe the marine environment. I mean, marine environment is still unexplored. In fact, I'm taking you down to explore the marine environment, alright? Because this is the most, how much research work is going on. There are a lot of expeditions, there are a lot of voyages which are being carried out, but there's still a lot remain which is still a mystery. Therefore, we can say that oceans are one of the most diverse environments on Earth, and Earth with incredibly interesting life forms. Many people say that we know more about the surface of moon than we know about the ocean floor. Now this is self-explanatory. Okay, that we know more about the surface of the moon than about the ocean floor. So there is still a lot to be discovered by studying the marine environment. Now this is again the same thing with light. I need not go again. What you can see, this is only to show you the depth of the trenches. Now, marine environment supplies many kinds of habitats. Okay, there's huge biodiversity. So biodiversity is based on different types of habitat that support marine life. Alright, now marine habitat can be divided into two. One is coastal and the other is open ocean habitat. Alright. Besides that, there is of course intertidal region also. Now animals living in intertidal region, they have to adapt themselves to a much larger extent than any animal which is living in the coastal or ocean habitat. Why? Because in both these ocean habitats, animal is always surrounded with water. The environment there is constant for the animal. But animals which are present in the intertidal region, they have to adjust themselves to different conditions. When there is high tide, the area is fully covered with water. Alright? When there is low tide, the water recedes, animal without any water. So it has to adapt itself much more than any of these animals. Now, most marine life is found in coastal habitat, even though shelf area occupies only 7% of the total ocean area. What does that mean? It means that your continental shelf area has variety of animals than in the oceanic zone. Alright. Now see, even our shores are of different types, and accordingly there are animals. Sandy shore will have different types of animal, rocky shore will have different types of animal, muddy shore will have different types of animal. So wide diversity among animals exists in this environment. Open ocean habitats are found in the deep ocean beyond the edges of continental shelf. Now, basically, if we talk about animals, the two basic division is one set of animal we call as plankton, alright, and second set of animals we call as nectons. Now what is the difference between the two? What are planktons? Planktons are a diverse group of organisms that live in the water column but cannot swim against current. They have locomotive power but very feeble locomotive power. Alright? They are more at the mercy of the current. By themselves they cannot actively swim, and for that they have many adaptations. They will have lot of spines so that the surface area increases. They may have oil droplet so that they can remain afloat. Now many of these zooplanktons are microscopic, but then there are animals coming under this category of zooplankton, but they are big, huge. Like for example, jellyfish. They run in few meters, but then they come under plankton. Why? Because they do not have locomotory power. I mean, very feeble locomotory power. So those are the animals which we call as plankton, and they form a crucial source of food, alright, to many large aquatic organisms, fish and whales, and we can call them as drifting animals. Now this is a picture of various zooplanktons which are present. Like we have Zuia, we have Sagitta, we have Lucifer, we have mysids, all types of zooplankton. Alright, see, they're very tiny, some are microscopic, but very, very important. We talked of plankton. Next set of animals we call as nectons. Now, how are nectons different from planktons?
They have locomotory organs.
Yes, they are capable of moving by themselves. So nectons are pelagic, or they can actively swim against the current also, right? And they are known as nectons. Now examples can be right from marine mammals, reptile, fish, to some of the invertebrates like squid, octopus, shrimp, and some crabs. Now we're talking of adaptations. When we talk of nectons, they are present right from the surface to the bottom. We'll be touching on that also. Now the animals which have their habitat at the lower level or near the bottom, definitely they need some adaptations. Alright, so what could be those adaptations? Now this picture is about the nectons which can move by themselves. Now these are certain marine nectons. Now in nectons we have different types of fish, dolphins, then this fish, and here these are deep sea fish with adaptations. Now deep sea fish will have a very broad mouth. Why? Because why do they need that? Visibility at the bottom is zero. It's absolute dark. They cannot see the food or the prey. So they need to have some sort of adaptation. So they have a huge big mouth so that whatever comes their way they can gobble it up. Then this one again is the deep sea. Now can you see this part? Alright. Now this here is the lure, which is luminescent. Okay, it gives out light. Now this will attract the prey because it lights up. Other animals will come towards it and it can feed on it. And all these are marine nectons. Clear? Now we go to the next. Now marine habitats can be divided into pelagic and demersal also. Now what does that mean? Pelagic, we have studied here also. Pelagic is surface. Demersal is below. Alright. So there are animals which are demersal, there are animals which are pelagic. Now demersal habitats are near or on the bottom of the ocean. Organism living in a pelagic habitat is said to be pelagic organism, such as pelagic fish. Similarly, an organism living in a demersal habitat is said to be demersal organism or a fish. Alright. Now marine habitats can be modified by their inhabitants. Some marine organisms like corals, kelp, mangroves and sea grasses are ecosystem engineers which reshape. Now see, you will find these corals or coral reef not at the bottom of this. You will find it more towards the shore, and they require clean, clear water with a definite temperature. And you will find in this ecosystem maximum colored, beautifully colored fish, because the visibility here is very high. Whereas if you see the fish which are demersal, you will find they are huge but not colorful at all, because there is no sense in having color, there is total darkness. Alright, but when you come here, coral reefs and all, you will find beautifully colored fish, and they need to have good power of camouflaging also. Now, being benthic means to be on the bottom or on solid surface. Most benthic habitats are associated with bottom of the ocean and are distinguished by depth, either inner shell or outer shell. Okay. Now, these are all benthic. Now, benthic is also used to describe organisms that live on other organisms, like barnacle that live on some species of whale. Alright. Now, it's something wonderful. These whales are pelagic. Barnacles are benthic, but they are on whales, so they get a right to go up also. Now, some interesting facts, like some species of marine life can be both pelagic and at the same time they can be benthic. Now, an example of this is, say, flatfish. Now, all of us have seen flatfish. It's flat because it is found benthic region. So it has to encounter the pressure. So body shape is totally different. You will find the upper side is colored, underside is not colored. Both eyes present on the same side. Now these are the adaptations for their bottom dwelling. Now they tend to rest on the bottom, but they come up in search of food. So here these are the species, they have both pelagic and benthic lifestyle. There are some species of marine life that can be both pelagic and benthic at different time of their life. That means in their life cycle, at certain time they are benthic, certain time they are pelagic. Alright. Now what would they be? They begin their life as pelagic, water dwelling babies, but settle after a period and become benthic adults. Sea stars, sea urchin, alright, their larvae, their young ones, they are all pelagic. And when they attain adulthood, then they turn into what you call as benthic. Alright. Now next we come to just a sort of revision for you of what we have already done. And if you have any doubts, you can ask. Here is the neritic region, oceanic, then inner shell, outer shell, basal, abyssal, a good view of the trench. I hope this is clear with you how we have classified. Yes? Now, one important thing is we have the continental shelf area and then the continental slope area. Alright. Now, any continent will have these areas. that is the continental shelf and continental slope. And I told you, this continental shelf area has got a lot of natural resources. Alright? There could be minerals, there could be oil, there could be a vast variety of fish which can be exploited. So economically, this region becomes very, very viable for us. Now earlier, what used to happen was, there was nothing called as EEZ or demarcation. Now what is this EEZ which we are talking here is exclusive economic zone. So much earlier there was nothing marked as exclusive economic zone. So anybody could or any country could come near your country, exploit the resources or going for fishing and take away the resources. But later on, after World War II, then UN also was very active in this. They formed what is called as EEZ, that is Exclusive Economic Zones. Alright. Now what is this? It is a sea zone prescribed by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. There are certain laws even meant for sea, which is being followed by most of the countries. Otherwise, there would have been a big chaos. So there are certain regulations. Alright. So what is it? Over it, state has special rights over the exploration and use of marine resources, including energy production. Now you can get a lot of energy through wind and water. Now it stretches from the baseline out to 200 nautical miles from its coast. 200 nautical miles, and the term does not include either the territorial sea or the continental shelf beyond 200 nautical mile limit. Alright, and the right to exploit that area is totally by the country. Now, what does that mean? International Law of the Sea and the United Nations. The first thing is, territorial waters are extension of water 12 miles from shore. Okay? And a nation has a right to jurisdiction within its territorial water. That area exclusively belongs to that country. No other country can enter this region and try to exploit it in any way. Second is exclusive economic zone, 200 nautical miles or 370 kilometers from nation's shoreline. Nations hold sovereignty over resources, economic activity and environmental protection over the area. So it's also the duty of that country to see that it protects the environment. There should be no pollution or there should be no misuse of that area. All oceans outside EEZ are called as high seas. Alright? So every country has got EEZ area. Beyond that, the extension of the sea, we call it as high seas. Now, what is high sea? High seas are shared by the citizens of the world. That high sea can be exploited by anybody. Alright, so I have my EEZ area which is exclusively mine and rest of it is can be used by anybody. Like see in our building, you may have a private terrace, there nobody can enter except you or with your permission. Then you have a terrace at the top. There, not anyone. People who are living in that building. Okay, outside you cannot. But near your building, if you have a park, what happens there? Nobody needs permission there. Anybody can enter. Alright. So similarly, in here, the ocean area outside EEZ, which is known as high sea, that can be shared by all. And finally, subject to some condition, the freedom of scientific research in the ocean is encouraged. In case I need to do some research work in some other EZ area, I can be permitted, but then I need to go legally, take permission and go in for research work. Alright? So this becomes very important and you all should know about the EEZ as to what EEZ is. Okay? So we are at the end. I took you down into the sea, saw the different realms of the sea. In short, we talked about how the zonations are, how the animals are, and in a nutshell, see, the biodiversity also in there is beautiful. At the surface you find one type of animals, which we talked of, zooplanktons. Neptons you find right from surface till the depths. Yeah. But then the conditions change, therefore the coloration will change, the body structure will change. So huge biodiversity exists in the ocean. Did you all understand about the?
Yes.
Sure? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.